I have walked out on a pool deck and been like,
boy.
excuse me. And it didn't go over very well, so I didn't do that again.
No. I'd love to have seen that.
Excuse me.
Welcome to Fit2B Radio. Slip on your minimal sneakers, notch your headphones into your ears, tuck your smartphone into your pocket, and take us along for a walk while we talk. Or just grab a cup of your favorite drink and get on the floor and stretch a bit while we bring you all things fitness, core, and diastases recti related.
You guys ready?
Yes.
Yep. All right.
Born ready.
Born ready. I love that.
I love your first one though, when you're like, I wish I could just say all those things.
I know.
That is so bad.
Hey everybody, welcome to Fit2B Radio. My name is Chris Spanky and I'm your host today. I'm also the co-founder of Fit2B Studio. I am here with Beth Learn. She's the CEO and founder of Fit2B Studio also. And we have a guest today that is going to be great. I'm excited to talk to her. Her name is Michelle Lyons. And let's get right into it. But first, I'd love to find out, Beth, you are a big Michelle fan. And you've been talking about recording this podcast for a little while now. So it's exciting that we're doing it. How do you know Michelle and why are you such a fan? Let's start with that.
Okay, so I met Michelle through all the connections online in the diastases community, pelvic floor health community, and just started following her, casual observer, you know how it goes. And then she was a speaker at the Women in Women's Health Live event that I went to in New York. We've had several guests come out of that because that event really blew me out of the water and just cemented my desire to help women get this information. And during the pre-show, I was telling Michelle how when I was in high school, you know, all my girlfriends were like, let's go to the concert, let's go see Newsboys, let's go see DC Talk, let's go see all these people, I grew up in the Christian community, so it was like all those Christian rock stars, Stephen Curtis Chapman.
Oh man.
And I think
there
there might have been some New Kids on the Block in there too for the Rebels.
Oh my goodness.
You're dating yourself now.
Don't admit New Kids on the Block. Don't ever say that again.
little Vanilla Ice,
I'm gonna bleep that out.
And so, they had all these posters and I was never into that stuff. I'm like, why would you put those people on your wall? I mean, why? And now though, as I was putting on my makeup today, I felt like I was going to a concert this morning because I can see Michelle because I really look up to her. I could put her poster on my wall.
So Michelle Lyons is a rock star.
Yes.
So Michelle, where are you coming to us from today?
Well, right now, Chris, I am in my office in Ireland for a change. I'm normally gallivanting around the world, teaching and talking and ranting about pelvic health and women's health generally. But I'm actually came back from the UK yesterday. So I'm here for today and tomorrow, and then I'm going over again on Friday because we've got Woman on Fire with, again, Beth and our mutual friend, Jenny Burrell. We've got to get you over next year, Beth.
Yes.
I would love it.
Yes. So, I spend a lot of my time traveling, but love being home. So here in a fairly rainy Ireland today.
Yes. Where in Ireland?
So I'm right in the middle. I'm about an hour outside of Dublin, right between the east and the west coast. Ireland's not that big, though. So, you're never too far away.
I love Ireland. My wife and I spent about 10 days there.
Oh, very good.
Drove around the whole thing, then went through the middle, and it was fantastic. Really good.
That was a bold move driving there.
Yeah. It was a bit sketch for the first couple hours, as you can imagine, as we learned to drive on the other side of the road and shift with the wrong hand.
Car. Yeah.
Other side of the car. But we did not get any dents or scratches or anything on our full-size car, which was very small to us. It was a very small full-size car.
My husband's American and he still kind of forgets every now and again, and we just kind of drift perilously to the other side of the road. So this is usually a quick adjustment. Even after all these years, he still lapses.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
It was exciting. It was exciting. Well, that is fantastic. I need to go back there. So we need to do some Fit2B travel over there.
Yeah. So much fun. Okay.
Let's do it. Okay. And we'll do another podcast from over there.
There you go.
That would be awesome.
So you're in Ireland, and then this thing that you went to, that was in New York. So you travel around and you do a lot of speaking.
Yeah.
What is your favorite thing to talk about while you're speaking? Like, when someone says, "Hey, Michelle, give it to me straight," what's the thing that you're going to tell them first?
The first thing, if I'm talking to a group of normal people, by, non-healthcare professionals, because anyone working in women's health, you have to be a little bit abnormal, I think, sometimes to do the work that we do. But
Sure.
I think if I'm talking to an average woman, the most important thing, I think, to tell them is that leaking isn't normal. It's common, but it's not normal. Pain isn't normal. And there's almost always something that we can do about it. If you just ask the right people the right questions. Because, like I was saying to Beth earlier, there's a lot of misinformation out there and rumors and myths. And unfortunately, some of it is still purported, by our medical colleagues, that, for example, a woman with pelvic organ prolapse, I was just talking to somebody last week. She's in her 30s. She's just had her third baby. She's got some prolapse, as 50% of women will have after giving birth. But she went to see her doctor because I'd recommended that she go and ask him about a pessary to support her prolapse. And he told her, no, you're too young. Those are only for little old ladies. Oh, exactly. Wow. That was my reaction too. That's a slightly more polite version of my reaction because, that is not what the evidence tells us,
Right.
And it's really just being able to reassure women that there are solutions that are non-surgical and non-pharmaceutical often as well, that we can really just provide minor tweaks like a pessary, like some lifestyle advice, like the right type of exercise, to really allow women to start living well again, to enjoy their lives and not have this sense of restriction because they're leaking or they've got a prolapse or they've got some pain. There's so much that we can do to help them. So I really just want to just take a second and applaud the work that you and Beth are doing here with this podcast. And, Beth, your work on social media, amazing. I'm a fangirl.
Thanks.
So, absolutely. But these are the conversations that we need to have. I think we're living in a golden age in terms of the evidence and the research that's out there.
Yeah.
But it's getting it true to people is something that I'm really, really passionate about because, women deserve better.
Right. And you have a huge history and I want to make sure people know how amazingly qualified you are. So can you just rattle off a few of your outstanding credentials? Because
yeah, sure. I've been a physio for 25 years. So I started out in orthopedics and sports medicine. I was that physio in PT school at the back of the class during the women's health lectures going, well, I'm never doing that, And, I've done the whole running onto the football pitch, on All Ireland final day and doing all that stuff. But then I have my own daughter and I realized really what goes on in terms of obstetrics and gynecology. And then I started diving a little bit deeper and, really amazed at the disconnect between the evidence to support what we can do to help women, the prevalence of pelvic floor dysfunction and really just the availability of services. So, I've bounced back and forth. I've lived in the States for quite a while. I spent some time in Canada. We've been back in Ireland now for about 5 years. But probably I've seen more of the US since I've been back here because I go to the US maybe once a month to teach.
Wow.
And I go to the UK once a month. And then usually once a year, I do a teaching tour in Australia, taking in New Zealand and this year Singapore as well. I was in South Africa before Christmas because it's really a growth area. Women are, I think psychosocially, there's a huge trend now. Women are saying, no, we demand better. Time is up on all sorts of things
fronts
going on here. But let's take back control of our health. Let's remove those barriers to living fully and living well. So I'm really just happy to be a part of that movement. I also think that, physio by itself isn't enough. I think we need that movement prescription skill set. I think we need to look at nutrition, at mindset, at sleep, at stress management, to get that hormonal balance.
Right.
But, it's about teaching women to ask for more and then giving them a toolbox to individualize their own health and well-being.
Yeah, because one of the main questions I get is, what do I ask? Like, they ask me, what do they ask? How do they look for? I am amazed at the disconnect among a lot of women where they don't even know how to ask. And
or who to ask.
It seems really simple. If you want to find a physio who does XYZ, then call up a physio clinic, or physical therapy clinic, as we call them here in the state, and ask, do you do XYZ?
Right.
But the thing is, they don't even have that vocabulary yet. So a lot of the education that we do is, here is the vocabulary. This is the name of the thing that you're looking for. Like, they know what they need. Can you rub this spot?
Right.
But what is that called? Well, that's called soft tissue release. That's called myofascial release. That's that's what you're asking for. And it's huge. You and I both are really passionate about reaching the lay people, the normal people,
Absolutely,
but also the professionals.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it has to be, a double-edged approach, because on the one hand, I think, and apparently I say this a lot because somebody made me a little Facebook meme about it, but most women know more about their phones than they do about their own bodies, particularly their own pelvis, because lots of women are very disconnected from that area of their body. And, there are just milestones in a woman's life, whether or not she chooses to have children, to have babies, and whatever mode of delivery that involves. But we know that 1 in 3 women have some sort of pelvic floor dysfunction.
Wow.
It's 1 in 3. It's a huge number. And we really just need to say, yes, it's very common. It's not normal. But to be able to sit down with somebody, sometimes when I'm working with students or with new grads, they'll say, well, what's the most important piece of equipment that I can get for my clinic, and I'm starting up. And they expect me to talk about, expensive biofeedback machines or real-time ultrasound. Honestly, I tell them, get some good anatomy models, because if you can sit down and explain to a woman what's actually happening in the body, why it's happening, and most importantly, what we're going to do about it, you really build that therapeutic alliance. You give her power, you give her agency over her own recovery. So it's not the physio or the doctor or the therapist, swooping in like the hero to save everybody, but you're giving women the tools to help themselves.
Right.
And just to see that kind of, that realization it's so rewarding. And to be able to teach other healthcare professionals to do that as well. It's like, hopefully, we're going to see the ripples going out with that as well, because there have been some huge improvements, but there's a lot done, but we've a lot more to do just yet before we get to where I'd like it to be.
Amen.
Right. Do you feel like people are surprised as you, just the average, woman, are they surprised as you kind of reveal some of this stuff to them? Like, wow, I just always thought.
Yeah. Well, I think, Chris, like what happens is sometimes we as women don't always tell each other the truth. There's a lot of mythology that, it's normal to leak after you've had children, or, women they've told me they've gone to their doctor because they're having pain with sex. Right. And the doctor said, well, that is normal, have a glass of wine and relax. No, or it's normal to leak. It's normal to have prolapse as you get older. And there's nothing we can do except surgery,
I like how you say it's common, but not normal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you're not alone, but we can help. You shouldn't accept.
Yeah. And every woman thinks that she's the only one who's gone through this, because there's such sometimes in women's health as professionals, we forget that, again, not everybody is like us, and apparently, Beth, normal people don't spend all day, every day talking about bladders and bowel health.
What?
They don't have pictures of vaginas in their Facebook newsfeed with,
Who knew?
All from
I
a
think
therapy
it's to
standpoint.
normalize the conversation, to make it, a part of a person's basic health screening, because when I was working in sports medicine, or orthopedics or just general musculoskeletal health, you'd see a patient coming in for whatever reason. And, I was that person, asking, so any problems with your bowel or bladder? Please say no, please say no, please say no. So we don't have to talk about it anymore, So you take that, but then you fast forward to maybe 5 years ago. I was at the World Congress on Abdominal and Pelvic Pain in Amsterdam.
Okay.
And a group of us went out for dinner. So there was 4 pelvic health therapists, a gynecologist and a urogynecologist. And we all go out for dinner in the red light district in Amsterdam. our table was told to be quiet because we were being too rude, because we were talking about
Wow.
we were talking about all the things that were going on,
Mhm.
and other people were just shocked because we were using correct anatomical terms. That's
God
all I'm
forbid.
going to say.
Yeah, but oh man,
It sounded like you were building up for a big joke there, too, by the way.
It's not repeatable though, Chris. I'm sorry.
my crowd loves specific anatomy. What they shy away from usually is, what they consider to be vulgar terms, and myself, I'm the same way. I just want to hear what the real terms are.
Absolutely.
When I was growing up, my mom, we didn't say farts. That was the F word in my house.
Yeah.
And I've shared that before. But my mom was also very open, and it wasn't that she shamed us. She just didn't want us to be sitting around talking about it at the dinner table. And she's very ladylike. And I think that is the average, not all. I have a very diverse following, but the average client of mine is very ladylike, and she likes correct terms. She wants to know the truth about her body. But she doesn't want to hear very many F words, that's for sure. Of either sorts. I had a girlfriend in college who would say that she was going to teach her boys, and she knew she was going to have boys, and she did. She had 3 boys. She was like, I'm going to have boys, and I'm going to teach them pretty girls don't have buttholes. And I was like, what? Why? No, she's like, girls don't fart. We don't do that. Beth, we don't do that. Because as ladylike as my mom was, I was very open, like, whoops, excuse me, and I'm saying all of this to feed Chris's face is hilarious right now. Chris, it was Trisha. It was Trisha that said that. So it was, but that was a lot of my friends. It was like, no, you don't, among us women, we don't talk about that. We don't mention it. And girls just don't do that. We hold it all in, which causes problems, in more ways than one. And Trisha, if you're listening, I love you. I really do. You really inspired me, girlfriend. Throwing you under the bus there. But this goes into, something you brought up in the pre-show that I really want to get to, the whole Kate Middleton thing. So she just had her 3rd baby. Yeah.
So absolutely. And congratulations, to her. But my question mark about it was, so I looked at all the pictures yesterday evening where she was leaving hospital 7 hours after giving birth to her 3rd child. And she's immaculate. Her hair is fabulous. Her makeup is done. She's wearing a dress. She's even wearing high heels.
She's the definition of a pretty girl.
She really is. And absolutely, I fully, I really endorse having staff, to do all that for you.
I know. That's what I said on our fan page was, hey, this is great. And this is, it's relatable, because it was this meme about, this is what Kate looks like 7 hours after a baby. This is what I look like 7 years after having a baby. And the woman's a hot mess. But it's like, let's just all take a moment to appreciate that she has people. And
many people.
Yeah.
And she's going home to a palace.
Right. With staff, another set of staff.
Another set of staff. But I worry that this adds another layer of pressure for women. If she's doing that, why can't I?
Yeah.
I will say one small thing though. She did wear a dress, and with the royal family and the photo opportunities, nothing happens by accident. She was wearing a dress that very clearly showed she still had a large bump, which I really applauded, because so many women that I've seen, go to hospital to have their baby, and they take the skinny jeans with them because they think, after the baby's on the outside world, everything just goes back in again.
Nope.
It takes a while. It takes a while. But, I really think we have to just, as women, I think we have to be real with each other and, say, this happened to me. Has it ever happened to you? Or, this happened to me and I got help for it, and this is who I went to see, and these are the questions, and here's what happened. Because sometimes I go and I lurk in some of the patient support groups, because I want to find out what real women are actually talking about, what their issues are, what are the conversations they're having.
And it's horrendous, isn't it? It's shocking.
Well, honestly, sometimes they feel like black pits of despair. You just need to be very psychologically sound going into some of them, because you want to help everybody, you really do want to help them, but so many of them don't know where to turn to, or they've been given some really patently bad advice, you know, by healthcare professionals. Yeah. And it's to try and break that cycle in a very gentle way, so you don't start off another cycle of despair. Right. Because sometimes when women do get help, there can often be the initial relief and joy that they're finding solutions to their problems. Mm-hmm. But there's almost always a little kickback of anger as well. Like, why didn't anybody tell me this before?
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about that for a second, because I think that it's not that a lot of times women are getting bad information just from the internet, which can't always be trusted, obviously. But sometimes they're getting bad information from people that they should be able to trust, like their doctor. So what do you say to that situation, and what do you say to that woman who feels like they have some fear because they feel like maybe it shouldn't be this way, but they're being told it's a normal thing and they need to just deal with it?
Well, and I'll wait a second. So, and just to back up that, I had a client in our forum say, "Hey, I went to my ND." So I'm assuming that's a naturopathic doctor. Mm-hmm. And I told him about Fit2B and how I'm doing, some pelvic floor work, just basic exercises, and working on the lift of the pelvic floor. And this ND, she's like, I'm all confused now because they said, no, that's not how you're supposed to work your pelvic floor. You're supposed to just squeeze the front muscles.
No.
And she's like, so now I'm confused because this doctor, so what is it? And I'm like, okay, question. Was this doctor a specialist in pelvic floor health? Yeah. And why, and have you understand that a full Kegel, this doctor's like, that's not how you do Kegels. I'm like, I never called them a Kegel. Those aren't Kegels. A full Kegel is the lift, the close, and the full relaxation down and open. That's summarizing it.
Absolutely.
But this doctor was like, no, a Kegel is just the front pinch. And it's like, what? No.
Right.
And that's tricky because you have to be diplomatic, and you want to be polite, because, these are our colleagues who are giving this advice. And, I don't trash anybody.
Right. That's why I was like, okay, does this person, is this specialized? Did they see something in you? And she's like, no, it was just kind of a side conversation.
I just tried to put it that, there's some newer research that actually shows here's what you really need to do. And they're like, maybe, your doctor probably just hasn't read this newer research yet. And inside I'm going, please don't ask me because this research is actually over 10 years old, but I'm going to say it's new.
Just to give them an out.
Oh goodness.
And I'd be happy to send them a copy of this paper and and discuss it with them if you think that would be helpful, because it's like Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you do better. We all started from somewhere, and hats off to general practitioners, primary care doctors, because they have to know a little bit about a lot of different things.
Right.
That is true.
Super hard.
So it is a super hard thing. You've got a very limited amount of time to work with a patient. However, if you are a gynecologist or a urogyn or an obstetrician, you should probably know better.
Yeah.
And if and that's where it becomes a little bit sticky, particularly if you have a patient who has been to see her OBGYN and she's being told that the only option is surgery, and she's saying, well, is that true? And if she's asking me point blank, is it true? I'm not going to lie, and say, yes, it is true. And of course, there are other options, because we know surgery, gynae repair surgery has a pretty high failure rate. Depending on which paper you read, 30 to 50% fail within the first couple of years.
And it's not like you get it.
Those aren't good stats.
These are not
like
good
you get it and go walking out of the hospital looking like Kate Middleton. I mean,
sadly, no.
There's
it's a serious surgery.
It's not ideally with some prehab as well as some rehab afterwards.
Right.
But lots of women have these repair surgeries and then they go back in for their 6-week post-op checkup and they say, well, okay, so can I go to boot camp now?
Right.
And the doc says yes.
Right.
and then or they've had a prolapse maybe because they're chronically constipated,
right?
Or they haven't got a good lifting technique, and then maybe some obstetric trauma as well. Lots of these issues can be dealt with conservatively. Managing your intra-abdominal pressure, pelvic floor muscle retraining, global exercise strategies, getting good glutes, getting good upper body strength, managing the breath and the pelvic floor, maybe a pessary if appropriate as well, because,
there's
and these are low risk, low cost interventions, compared to surgery.
Yeah.
Now, wait, she said pressure. That means we can talk about the chicken now.
Yeah. So there's this
Is that what you're waiting for?
What's the chicken? What is the chicken? What are we talking about here?
So, I've been doing this for quite a while, and I've spent a lot of money over the years on various anatomical models and props to explain things to both women that I'm seeing from a client perspective, and also then the students that I'm teaching in my courses. The most effective teaching tool that I've probably ever bought is my $3 rubber chicken from Amazon to explain intra-abdominal pressure. Because if you're doing a lot of breath holding, doing crunches, this is what can happen, So it's a very strong visual when you think about what's happening to your pelvic organs. If you're breath holding, or you're straining to lift, or you're breath holding when you're going from sit to stand or having a bowel movement, this is a visual that tends to stay with people, and all you have to say is remember the chicken. And
so if you're listening to this podcast and you're not seeing what we're talking about, she's got a rubber chicken that has a pelvic floor issue.
Yes, it does.
And if you want to know more about that, you've got to pop over to our website, go to the podcast page, find this episode, and watch the video. The chicken alone is worth it. The chicken alone is worth it.
Now,
for nothing else, just go for the chicken.
The first time I saw this, this used, and this is why I appreciate you, Michelle. The first time I saw this used, somebody was using the chicken, the poor chicken, to show why we shouldn't do transverse squeezes at all. And they were squeezing the dickens out of the center of this chicken and showing how that puts all this pressure. So we need to stop squeezing the transverse, which that's all you've been doing to work your core. And you are experiencing pressure in your pelvis. And you feel like you're leaking and your prolapse symptoms are getting worse when you're doing transverse holds. By all means, yes, back up. And take a load off and make sure that you're doing it right. Because as Kelly from the Tummy Team says, lighter, not tighter, ladies, please.
That's it.
Right. So we are wanting a full good contraction. As we interviewed Tupler a couple weeks ago. You guys can check out that podcast if you want. She has like different levels and she's trying to get people to go a little bit deeper with each progression. But even then there's a stopping point, right? We don't want people. And so at first, this analogy kind of turned me off. But when Michelle did it at Women in Women's Health Live, the way you just explained it, I was like, okay, all right. Because this makes sense. And we're not trying to say, because you could take that chicken and you could make it do those same motions without so much pressure, right? There's a strategy to it. And that's what you discussed. And that's what I love is, that connection. I don't even know if I can put it into words. Can you help me?
Well, the thing is, specifically if we're talking about pelvic organ prolapse, where a woman's pelvic organs, her bladder, her uterus, her rectum are moving down and out into places that they shouldn't be. So they're putting a lot of downward pressure on the vagina. So there's two ways that we can help manage prolapse. We can support from below. So, doing pelvic floor muscle training.
We could put a plug in the chicken.
We could put a pessary in the vagina also, yes. Or a plug in the chicken would be another way of putting it. But managing the pressure, bracing the pelvic floor muscles, for example, something called the knack, where you do that preemptive tightening of the pelvic floor muscles before you have a large increase in pressure. So before you cough, before you sneeze, before you go from sit to stand. So you support it from below, but you also want to decrease that pressure from above.
Right.
So breath holding when you're lifting, when you're straining to have a bowel movement, using the arms in the chair and breath holding every time you go from sit to stand. That's all a lot of downward pressure. So what we really need to think about is it's pressure management within the system,
Right.
And we need to have some distensibility. We need to have good contractile strength, absolutely, in our abdominals, because, they're there to protect our internal organs. They're there to lend their support, particularly trans abs, with the pelvic floor and multifidus and the diaphragm, to provide that dynamic stability as we move through the world. But if they're too tight, there's nowhere for that pressure to go except down and out.
Right.
So we're always looking for that balance. Yes, we want to be able to contract the muscles, but they have to be able to move as well. The very same thing with the pelvic floor too. We need to have the pelvic floor able to have a nice resting tone.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be able to close and lift, when we're coughing or sneezing, or it's not an appropriate time for us to go and urinate or defecate. But we also need to have that extensibility,
Right.
we can come back down to a resting tone, that we have enough, we can have some lengthening if we're having a bowel movement or having a baby, through the vagina. But it's about having that range of motion available, because like with any muscle, if you're continuously tighten, if we had a very tight biceps or tight upper traps, what happens to the muscles? They become painful and dysfunctional, and we have to develop all these other strategies then, because you're asking muscles to do something they're not designed to do. Right. So it's full range of motion and strength appropriate for the level of demand being placed on the body, managing those pressures, having the support from below, taking some of the pressure off the fascia and the connective tissue, within the pelvis, and just treating every woman as an individual, finding out what her story is, what success looks like for her, what are her goals and aspirations in terms of movement or exercise, and then tailoring a program to fit her. Because I would never tell somebody not to exercise. Sometimes it's like, oh no, my physio said I can never do squats again because I have a prolapse. So, well, how do you go from sit to stand then?
Right.
How are you going to sit?
How do you do your life?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's function is what drives me.
Now, for guys, women, we've got a lot of things going on down there. So do guys. I love what somebody said recently. My yoga mentor, she was talking about how yoga was originally invented by guys and for guys. Yep. And so there are quite a few movements that are not necessarily suitable. And I know Ginger Garner also touched on this during the Birth Healing Summit, is we have got an extra opening, and therefore we are more susceptible to high pressure. But men can also have issues. Can you just take a moment to speak, on behalf of Chris and to all guys, because I know there's guys that listen to this too, is how does the rubber chicken concept play out in the male pelvic floor?
Yeah, so I think probably awareness of, because I know I said at the start that I don't think there's enough awareness of women's pelvic health issues, but I think there's probably even less when it comes to men's pelvic health. And I would say particularly for men with pelvic pain due to overactivity in their pelvic floor muscles,
right?
To men who've gone through prostate cancer surgery, who are suffering with urinary incontinence and erectile dysfunction. There's a huge perception, even, within the medical community, that men don't really have pelvic floor muscles, so they don't have to deal with any of these issues.
What?
I know it is shocking, but it is unfortunately true. So many men that I've talked to who've gone through prostate cancer treatment, for example, 100% of men who've gone through prostate cancer treatment will wake up with a catheter in situ and will go through a period of urinary incontinence. And it's shocking, and it can be very soul destroying for them as well. Because, I imagine. Absolutely, because they're not warned. Even if they were warned this is going to happen, and here's a strategy for dealing with it.
Right.
Because that's the frustration, I think, with men's pelvic health. There's a good and growing body of evidence, particularly in the field of prostate cancer, because it's the second most common cancer that men will get in the US. And treatments have come on so much. I mean, the 5 and 10 year survival rate for prostate cancers in the US is somewhere between 97 and 99%.
Wow.
That's great.
Absolutely. But too many men are still dealing with urinary incontinence and erectile dysfunction after prostate cancer. And there's no need for it for most of them. If they've had neurovascular sparing in their surgery, if they've had prehab, there's so much that we can do. The goal would be to get every man dry by 3 months post prostatectomy. But the harder, if we're not seeing them pre-op, it's quite hard, obviously, to retrain a traumatized set of pelvic floor muscles.
Right.
It's not just prostate cancer though with the guys. We see a lot of pelvic floor dysfunction in our male athletes. who have that overactivity in their pelvic floor.
Okay.
Maybe some driven by some overactivity in their abdominals as well, because they're doing crunch, 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 crunch all the time, and everything's getting shorter and tighter. Or maybe some pudendal dysfunction because they're doing a lot of endurance cycling, and they're sitting on that, that bicycle saddle that's perfectly shaped to compress all the neural and vascular structures in the male perineum as well.
Right.
So these are conversations. It's not just a female-centric issue.
No, not at all.
Everyone has a pelvic floor, and it's really important that we have these conversations in a public forum like this, so that who knows who it's going to reach, and then that woman or that man can reach out and say, I never knew there was help for that, because there absolutely is. There's no need to live with that. There's almost always something we can do about it. And sometimes it's just something really, really simple, like dealing with the constipation that you're having. That's a huge driver for pelvic floor dysfunction in both men and women and children, and constipation is one of my favorite things to talk about, much to the delight of my teenage daughter.
I think we need to have you back for a whole podcast about just that, because I am learning how much it spins out and impacts
everything.
Yeah, it's huge.
Everything.
It's huge.
So
now go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to say, so how does that tie into, I'm suspecting that actually ties pelvic floor health into nutrition itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you think about it, Chris, essentially we're looking at two ends of the same tube, So we have to, I think if we're going to talk about bladder health and bowel health and pelvic pain and sexual health, if we're going to talk about it in a truly holistic, fashion, we've got to look at what we're putting in, what are we eating? How are we eating it? Are we absorbing the nutrients appropriately? And then how are we eliminating waste products from the other end? Are we having a good bowel movement every day? Are we struggling? Are we having difficulty controlling our bladder? Are we having pain when we are urinating? And again, the solutions for all of these, they're out there. The awareness isn't out there, but the research to back up what it is that we can do. And it's getting the big rocks right. Are you eating well? Are you eating the right type of food? Can you absorb those nutrients? Are you slowing down to eat? And then really just teaching people how to get that coordination oftentimes is all that's needed with their pelvic floor muscles, because we know that the two big drivers for constipation are transit through the bowel. It's too slow, too much water gets resorbed, so the stool gets really hard and dry and it's difficult to pass. And the other big driver is what we call pelvic floor dyssynergia, which means that when the pelvic floor should be lengthening and relaxing to have a bowel movement, it's actually closing up and tightening up, and we're having to strain against it.
Right.
And we have some nice research showing that if we actually deal with the pelvic floor coordination issue, that will improve the transit time through the gut. Simple things like abdominal massage for constipation. Beautiful, simple. You can do it for yourself. No risks, no side effects. You go into CVS or Walgreens or any pharmacy, the shelves of constipation cures that are there.
Oh, and then on the other side, the shelves of incontinence products, all the pads.
It's a huge industry.
Diapers.
It's a huge, huge industry.
They're making money off us.
Stats. Well, there's more money spent on incontinence pads in the US last year than there was spent on sanitary pads for menstruation.
Wow.
What?
I know.
So that means, my brain, my layman's brain just went to, that means there are more people
chronically incontinent
than there are women on their periods.
It's the second, loss of bladder and bowel control is the second most common reason for admission to a nursing home. It's the only bigger
Say that
reason
again.
is dementia.
Say that again. That was
okay.
That was huge.
Okay. Bladder and bowel incontinence issues are the second most common reason for admission to a nursing home.
Wow.
Boom.
Wow.
Oh, that gave me
and here's one more I'm going to throw in. 1 in 5 women over the age of 40, which is not that old, has some sort of anal incontinence. 1 in 5.
Yep, not me. I'm good.
1 in 5. That is such a high number.
Yep, that is a big number. But so we go through a lot of changes in that perimenopausal period, and oftentimes that's when obstetric events of the past catch up with us.
Yeah.
So it really is, pelvic health is a lifelong commitment. It's something that you have to be aware of every day, not in a scared way. I'm not here to fearmonger, but just to pay attention to it, and to give it some love, give it some respect, because your pelvic floor, it's responsible for bladder function, bowel function, your sexual health, lumbopelvic stability. So really important for back pain, really important working with your diaphragm for your lymphatic system. The pelvic floor really is the answer to everything.
I agree.
So obviously
really
it's better if you're paying attention to this your whole life, but what do you say to the woman that's perimenopausal that is just now listening to this podcast that hasn't really been told, doesn't know, hasn't paid attention to this in the past? What do you say to her?
Well, I would say, first of all, are you having problems? Are you leaking when you're coughing or sneezing? Are you leaking, you're not making it to the bathroom on time? Are you losing control over gas or over, any sort of leakage from your back passage? Are you having any pain with sex? Are you having any back pain?
Right.
If you are, go see a good women's health PT. You can go, full disclosure, I'm on the faculty of Herman and Wallace, the Pelvic Rehab Institute, but we have a therapist directory on the website. You can go to pelvicrehab.com. The APTA also has a therapist locator.
Right.
Go get checked out, because you know what? I mean, if you have a car, you take your car to get serviced. Don't you? I mean, because if you don't take your car to get serviced, what happens? The tires go out, wear out.
Yeah.
You get it tuned up every so often. And I just think to really, if you can, it's always easier to deal with a smaller problem than it is to deal with a bigger problem.
Right.
But even if you're having a bigger problem, still go see your women's health PT, because there's almost always a solution. And even if you do end up needing some sort of surgical intervention, the better shape you are going into surgery, the easier and more successful your recovery is going to be as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, it's a win-win.
Something keeps rattling around in my brain, and that means I need to say it. And that is this interesting dichotomy. As you talked about men, and we're talking about women, and how men really don't know and are not told to expect incontinence issues post-surgery, whereas women, we're told. We're like, when I had my first baby, I had my sister and 15 other women say, go buy pads. You're going to need those for 6 to 8 weeks after you have a baby. You're going to be a hot mess. That's just normal. And yes, for those first few weeks after, sure, while your body's recovering. However, there was also this, hey, you're going to have babies and you're just going to start peeing your pants. Get ready. Haha. Deal with it. Yeah. Whereas men, it's like they're not told, and it is so much more a part of their identity.
Absolutely.
Their function down there is a huge part of their psyche.
Yeah.
With us, it's like the opposite. It's like we're so dissociated,
disconnected,
that we're not dealing with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's a huge denial.
So nobody's dealing with it.
No one's dealing with it well.
No one's dealing with it.
Yeah. And there's anger from the response is still anger. But with men, it's like if you tell a guy, hey, dude, you can go get this fixed in a couple of visits for a couple $100s, they slap the cash down typically.
Absolutely.
Women, you tell them, hey, you can, well, no, it's
it's okay. I'll be fine. Yeah. No, no, that is not okay. It is not okay to pee on yourself. I'm sorry.
You don't want to be the chicken, for crying out loud.
Don't be the chicken. Absolutely. Think of the chicken. And I think that's why, it's important as women that we talk to each other and we tell each other the truth, particularly those of us who are working in women's health, that we do spread that message that there is help out there. And for those of us who are working in men's health as well, that we explain to men exactly what's going to happen. Because I think for women, say in that postnatal scenario that you just described, Beth, I think we're kind of used to the whole pads thing, and we're used to maybe having internal examinations if we're having pap smears or we're having antenatal visits. For men, sometimes when you're, talking about pelvic health,
yeah, they're not used to it.
They're not used to it, first of all, particularly if you're going to do an internal examination, it's like you're going to put what where? It's like, sorry, what? But I think for men particularly, a lot of men are very defined. Their genitals are on the outside. It's part of their self-definition. And, the research would show that if you ask men before prostate surgery, which is more important to them, in terms of regaining it afterwards, their erectile function or their incontinence, all the men pre-op tend to say, well, it's much more important that I regain my sexual function. But almost 100% of the men afterwards will say, no, we need to get this continence thing sorted out. ASAP. We'll deal with the sexual stuff later, but let's get, because it's such a culture shock, and so many of them are not warned. And then that can lead to a lot of anger and frustration. And, that really hampers their global recovery, from cancer. Because, when you're stressed, your whole immune system is under a little bit of pressure.
Right.
You're afraid to eat or drink. You're afraid to go out and socialize, maybe to, to go out and participate in exercise or sport, which is so important in terms of dealing with the side effects of cancer treatment.
Exercise,
also,
yes.
Yeah, getting yourself back again and preventing cancer recurrence.
Yeah.
And dealing with the bone health issues and the cancer-related fatigue. So movement, I really believe movement is medicine. And as I said, for me, all roads lead to function. But education is absolutely vital. And I really do feel for a lot of men, who go through this procedure, you get that diagnosis of cancer, you have the surgery, and you think then you're out of the woods, but then you have to deal with all the sequelae of the cancer treatment, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating and it's maddening for them. But again, these are the conversations that we need to keep having, because there's so much that we can do to help them regain control of their lives.
Yes, there's so much hope. And it's evidence-based hope. It's not just out there, we think,
there's no woo-woo here. It's hard science. I'm a big believer in evidence-based practice, know, and all the research backs it up. But that's where the disconnect is, because there's a good amount of evidence, but there isn't enough awareness.
Yeah. Right. And it's like we've got this huge funnel, and our funnel is constipated. It's like we've got to get that thing, all the information.
It's all about the constipation.
There's a block. There's 59 blocks. It's like the carpool lane at my kid's school.
Absolutely. So that's why I was honored that you asked me to come on here, because I think this is a really important forum for getting the information out to people and to have these real life conversations. And even if we just affect one person, because in a lot of households, I would suspect that a lot of your listeners are female, but we know that in most households, the healthcare decision makers are female. So even if one woman thinks of a male relative or a male friend who's gone through this and says, I was listening to this crazy Irish physio on Beth's podcast, and she said, even if just one person gets the message, but for all women, we can do better. We must do better.
We must.
Why are we satisfied with so little?
I'm not. I know you're not. Not at all. Not at all. I mean, I've been
the revolution.
I've been doing Fit2B for 8 years now.
Yeah.
And did not set out to do pelvic stuff. I mean, I was like, nope, core, just core. Not even at the time.
Right.
Like, 5 years ago, I knew there was coactivation. I knew there was connection, but I just was like, just let other people
did you know.
Just let other people.
And here you are.
Little did you know.
Well, because, Michelle, like I said, I serve this crowd of women, mostly women, that does like things a bit more delicate and modest.
Right.
And so we come from backgrounds where a lot of times these topics were taboo. I was blessed that my mom was very open and ladylike at the same time, but used correct anatomical terms, like I said before. And but not all women have that, and they don't have the words. And my question I want to ask, my final big one is, what would you say to the woman who has bought into the notion that it's not only normal to be broken, we've addressed that, but that it's somehow good?
Yeah. So what I would say is, I would quote Albert Einstein, and I would say that God doesn't play dice with the universe, first of all. So you are perfectly designed. However, you have gone through some events in your life that have placed your body under stress. You know, we in the Western, we have become more sedentary. You know, we're not as active as we used to be. I think, you know, particularly if we're talking about sexual health and maybe, you know, sexual pain postnatally as well. This is where I like to bring out my big poster set of the illustrated clitoris. And I start to talk about genital anatomy. We talk about how the clitoris has about 8,000 nerve endings, twice as many as your average penis, you know, and the penis has lots of other jobs. But do you know the clitoris only has one job, and its job is pleasure. You wouldn't have been designed like this if pleasure was not your God-given right, you know? So by honoring your body, by honoring yourself, you know, that's a fundamental, not only a fundamental human right, but I think it's a human responsibility as well, because if you are lucky enough to be born a woman in the Western world where you have access to information and hopefully healthcare advocates, it's your duty really to be grateful for these opportunities and to restore your body to its former glory, and to live well, to enjoy it.
Yeah. And then
You know?
I love, you know, as I was researching female anatomy for the Fit2B girls course and was pondering, how do I phrase things about the clitoris without making it sexual? Because like you just said, that's actually its primary role. But for young girls, and what I discovered and learned more about was that, okay, yes, once it's stimulated, and I use the word activated, it does do other things at that point. It massages the uterus. It brings blood flow.
Absolutely.
It clears things out. Like, it has tons of other jobs. But to do those jobs, it has to be allowed to do its first job. And so, and I would add to what you said, like, and if you're in this healthy relationship otherwise, but you're shutting out that and you're not giving yourself the chance to experience pleasure, whether that be sexually or just out playing with your kids, okay,
Absolutely.
just using your body.
Absolutely.
Then it's like I think we're limiting what we are made for.
you are limiting, and you're frankly, I think you're being disrespectful. You know, because you're here for a reason, I believe, and you know, like I said, God doesn't play dice with the universe. You are not imperfectly designed. You have a clitoris for a reason. You know, and the female orgasm. Essentially, I mean, obviously a woman's biggest sexual organ is her brain. The female orgasm is a series of rhythmic contractions of your pelvic floor muscles, 0.8 of a second apart. So, I mean, obviously the pelvic floor, as I said, is responsible for everything. But honestly, it's one of the best ways that you can exercise your pelvic floor as well. You know, pleasure is not bad. You know, but like you said, it's sometimes it's starting with embracing your sensual side, and you know, not just your sexual side. So, you know, like we were talking about, going out and feeling the warmth of the sun, you know, eating some nice food, you know, and it drives me bonkers when I hear women, I was so naughty, I ate some chocolate. Like, if you're going to eat the chocolate, enjoy the chocolate. You know,
chocolate's not naughty.
Smell it, taste it. No, it's full of antioxidants, you know.
And magnesium, so good for you.
You know, it's about allowing yourself pleasure and allowing yourself to have pleasure living in your body. You know, whether that's the things that you look at, the music that you listen to, not watching the news, you know, it's never good. Don't allow that into your body.
That's
you know,
true.
Eating food that's good for you and that tastes good, moving your body, appreciating your body, and showing it some love.
And scientifically, that helps you stay healthy.
And you can't, you know, you have to be on your list. You have to be on the self-care list as well. You know, like, I travel a lot for work. What do they tell you on a plane? You have to put on your own mask first before you can put on anybody else's. So if we're going to be able to look after the people in our lives, you can't pour from an empty cup. You know, so you've got to have that self-care near the top of your list.
And it's not selfish.
It's not selfish. It's not. It's essential.
It's essential.
Yeah, it is smart. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Soapbox over.
It's so good.
Oh, okay. We got to have you back though, because I
Anytime.
could listen to the
So
soapbox
good.
all day.
Yeah, so good.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Michelle, thank you so much for spending time with us. We for sure need to have you back on.
A delight.
This has been great. One of my favorites. So
I don't want it to end.
well, we just need to reschedule and do another podcast. I love
That's all there is to it.
We will.
Great.
Thank
My
you so
pleasure.
much for joining us, Michelle.
Thank you for having me. I was delighted to be invitation.
Bye.
Good golly, Miss Molly, if that didn't give you something to chew on, I don't know what will. Thanks for listening. I really hope you join our community over at Fit2B.com, where you can gain access to all our exercise videos and fitness e-courses. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to Fit2B Radio, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Fit2B, on Instagram at Fit2B Studio, and on Facebook via Fit2B Tennessee Fitness. See you soon!